Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: Iran showcases its reach with militia attacks across Middle East. Why Gaza matters. Update 1: Israel to pull some troops from Gaza as war enters new phase. The US and Israel, an embrace shows signs of strain after October 7. US and UK step up pressure on Houthi rebels to deter Red Sea shipping attacks. Iran showcases its reach with militia attacks across Middle East. Washington Post. The Gaza war has allowed Iran to flex its new network of allied militias, demonstrating the country's strategic reach while staying at arm's length from the fight, according to members of the groups and military analysts. Since the Hamas assault on Israel in October, one or more of these militias has carried out an attack somewhere in the Middle East each day. The groups include the Houthis in Yemen, which are targeting ships in the Red Sea, Kataib Hezbollah and other Iraqi groups, which are hitting US bases in Iraq and Syria, and Lebanon's Hezbollah, which is engaged in daily exchanges of fire with Israeli forces across the Israel-Lebanon border. While the attacks may appear random, they are part of a carefully calibrated strategy to bring cohesion to the loosely formed alliance of militias, known as the Axis of Resistance, which all share loyalty to Iran. The groups coordinate and consult through a joint operations room that meets regularly, typically in Beirut, and have a degree of autonomy over attacks in their area based on their capabilities and local agendas. The actions are designed to avoid a wider regional war and are not in conflict with Iran's strategic objectives. Why Gaza matters. Foreign affairs. The Gaza Strip has historically played a pivotal role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, despite being isolated for much of the past 2 decades due to Israel's blockade. The recent war in Gaza has reset the Palestinian question, putting Gaza and its people at the center of any future negotiations. Any attempt at rebuilding Gaza will need to take into account its strategic position in the region. The demilitarization of Gaza can only be achieved by lifting the blockade and focusing on its economic development. The United States and its allies must recognize that Gaza will play a central role in finding a lasting solution to the conflict. Gaza has a long and rich history, dating back 4,000 years. It has always been a contested territory due to its strategic location, connecting Egypt to the Levant. Throughout history, Gaza has been fought over by various empires and powers. It has also been a major religious center for Christianity and Islam. The territory was absorbed by the Ottoman Empire in 1517 and later fell under British and Israeli control. The creation of the Gaza Strip as it is today came after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The current war between Israel and Hamas is a result of the denial of Gaza's historical identity and the failure to address the needs of its people. The status quo collapsed in 2023 when Hamas launched a horrific attack, leading to the current cycle of violence. To achieve peace and security, Gaza must be allowed to reconnect with the region and be given the opportunity for economic development. The policy of siege and blockade must end, and a strategy for redevelopment must be put in place. This is the key to demilitarizing Gaza and finding a lasting solution to the conflict. Update 1: Israel to pull some troops from Gaza as war enters new phase. Yahoo! An Israeli official has said that Israel is withdrawing some forces from Gaza to shift to more targeted operations against Hamas, and is partially returning reservists to civilian life to help the economy as the war looks set to last well into the new year. The official said toppling the Islamist faction remained an objective of the offensive in the Palestinian enclave, and that some of the 5 brigades withdrawn will prepare for a possible flare-up of a second front against Hezbollah in Lebanon. The US and Israel, an embrace shows signs of strain after October 7. New York Times. President Biden was getting ready to leave the White House for an audacious flight to Israel to demonstrate solidarity after the October 7 terrorist attack when suddenly the trip seemed to be falling apart before it even began. An explosion at a Gaza hospital had reportedly killed or wounded hundreds. The Palestinians were blaming Israel, and Arab leaders were refusing to meet with Mr. Biden when he arrived in the region. The president summoned advisors to the treaty room on the 2nd floor of the White House family quarters to answer the question, should he still go? A robust debate broke out between his national security and political advisors. Some in the room urged Mr. Biden to scrap the trip. It was not clear what could be accomplished. It might not even be safe. What if Hamas launched rockets at Ben Gurion International Airport when Air Force One approached? Where would the president land then? Others argued that he needed to go anyway. He had already announced the visit. They should not lurch from one decision to another. And preliminary US intelligence indicated that Israel was not responsible for the hospital explosion. Finally, Mr. Biden weighed in. I've got to go, he said. I've got to see these guys face to face. That decision, perhaps more than any other, would come to define Mr. Biden's approach to what has become the most divisive foreign policy crisis of his presidency. He had to go. He had to see them face to face. With that, he effectively took ownership of the war that would follow in all its overpowering brutality, managing it personally at great political risk to himself at home and abroad. No other episode in the past half-century has tested the ties between the United States and Israel in such an intense and consequential way. The complicated diplomacy between Washington and Jerusalem since Hamas terrorists killed 1,200 people and seized 240 hostages has played out across both governments, in direct interactions between the leaders and intense back and forth between military and intelligence agencies. US and UK step up pressure on Houthi rebels to deter Red Sea shipping attacks. Financial Times. The UK and the US have increased pressure on Houthi rebels after the group targeted commercial vessels in the Red Sea. UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps said the UK was willing to take direct action against the rebels, who are aligned with Iran. Shapps warned that if the Red Sea was not protected, this would embolden other threats to freedom of navigation in other areas, including the South China Sea and Crimea. The US has deployed 2 carrier strike groups to the region since an attack on Israel by Palestinian militant group Hamas on October 7. US firefight with Houthi gunmen heightens shipping risk in Red Sea. Washington Post. U.S. Navy helicopters exchanged fire with Houthi militants in the Red Sea on Sunday. The incident began when Houthi militants approached a Singapore-flagged, Danish-owned vessel and exchanged fire with the security team on board. U.S. helicopters responded to a distress call from the ship and fired on the militants, sinking 3 of the 4 boats and killing their crew members. The U.S. helicopters did not sustain damage and no U.S. personnel were injured. The Houthis, who are an Iranian-backed militant group that controls northern Yemen, have been attacking commercial ships since October as a retaliatory action for Israel's military offensive in Gaza. Their campaign has coincided with strikes by other Iran-backed militant groups in Lebanon and Iraq targeting Israel or its closest military and political ally, the United States. The attack on Sunday appeared to be the first direct engagement between the U.S. and Houthi forces since October. The incident follows another missile attack on the same vessel on Saturday night. War in Gaza will continue for months, says Netanyahu, as intensified Israeli air raids kill 35 more people in Gaza. ABC. At least 35 people were killed yesterday as Israeli jets intensified their attacks on central Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that the war will continue for many more months and that Israel will assume control of the Gaza side of the border with Egypt. The current conflict has killed thousands and leveled much of Gaza, and there are now questions over an eventual two-state solution. Speaking at a news conference on Saturday, Netanyahu stated that Israel must maintain open-ended security control over the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, airstrikes killed 10 people in one house in Al-Maghazi in Al-Buraj, central Gaza, forcing more to flee to Rafah on the border with Egypt from front lines where Israeli tanks are battling Hamas fighters. The Israeli military's stated goal is to eliminate Hamas, which launched a surprise cross-border assault on Israeli towns on October 7. Israeli air and artillery bombardment has killed over 21,800 people according to health authorities in Gaza, and pushed nearly all of Gaza's 2.3 million people from their homes. Malaysians hit back as McDonald's franchisee sues over Israel boycott. South China Morning Post. McDonald's Malaysia is suing pro-Palestinian boycott movement, BDS Malaysia, for allegedly damaging its business and inciting public hatred against the brand. The lawsuit has backfired on the fast food chain, with social media users defending the consumer boycott of McDonald's and expressing support for the Palestinian cause. The Malaysian public is particularly angered by McDonald's demand for compensation from BDS Malaysia to cover the termination of employees during the boycott. The boycott movement is part of a global effort to pressure Israel to comply with international law through boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning the country and entities that support it. Saudi wealth fund PIF fund outpaces Singapore's GIC with $31.6 billion splurge. South China Morning Post. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, PIF, was the world's most active sovereign investor in 2023, increasing its deal activity to $31.6 billion, up from $20.7 billion the previous year, according to Global SWF. GIC, which had been the most active sovereign wealth fund for 6 years, cut its capital deployed by 46% to $19.9 billion as it reduced investments across developed markets. Temasek also reduced new investments by 53% to $6.3 billion. Sovereign wealth funds controlled by the governments of Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar took 5 of the top 10 spots, deploying almost 40% of all investment value. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Hex, your guide through the fascinating world of 6 degrees. Today, we have been presented with a variety of news stories that highlight the complex dynamics at play in the Middle East. First, we learned about Iran's ability to showcase its reach through its network of allied militias. These militias, including the Houthis in Yemen, Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, have been carrying out coordinated attacks across the region. While these attacks may seem random, they are part of a carefully calibrated strategy to bring cohesion to the loosely formed alliance known as the Axis of Resistance. Iran's ability to project power through these militias demonstrates its strategic reach while maintaining plausible deniability. Next, we explored the significance of Gaza in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Despite being isolated for much of the past 2 decades, Gaza remains a pivotal player in any future negotiations. The recent war in Gaza has reset the Palestinian question, putting Gaza and its people at the center of the conflict. To find a lasting solution, the demilitarization of Gaza must be coupled with economic development and an end to the blockade. Recognizing Gaza's historical and strategic importance is crucial for moving forward. We also delved into the strained relationship between the United States and Israel. President Biden's visit to Israel in the aftermath of a terrorist attack proved to be a defining moment in his presidency. The decision to go, despite the risks, showcased his commitment to face the situation head-on. This episode has tested the ties between the United States and Israel in an intense and consequential way, with diplomacy playing out at all levels of government. Moving on, we examined the increasing pressure on Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. The UK and the US have taken a firm stance against the Houthi rebels, who have targeted commercial vessels in the region. This escalation of tensions raises concerns not only for the Red Sea but also for other areas where freedom of navigation is at risk. The recent engagement between US Navy helicopters and Houthi militants highlights the seriousness of the situation. In Gaza, the war shows no signs of ending soon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that the conflict will continue for many more months. The devastating impact on the people of Gaza cannot be ignored, with thousands dead and much of the territory leveled. The pursuit of a 2-state solution now faces even greater challenges. Lastly, we learned about the backlash faced by McDonald's in Malaysia. The fast food chain is suing a pro-Palestinian boycott movement, which has sparked support for the boycott and the Palestinian cause. This case highlights the power of public opinion and the global effort to pressure Israel to comply with international law. In conclusion, the news stories presented today shed light on the complex dynamics in the Middle East. The region is a hotbed of conflict and geopolitical maneuvering, with multiple actors vying for power and influence. It is essential to understand the historical, strategic, and humanitarian aspects of these conflicts to find a path towards peace and stability. As always, I encourage you, my esteemed audience, to share your thoughts and questions. What are your ideas on these developments? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.